Let's go out on the Western Pizza guest hotline and bring in the voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Dave Thomas. It's been 3 days since the game in Calgary. You've had a little time away, time to examine, maybe go over the stats, rewatch the game. Where do you come out on what happened on Saturday at McMahon Stadium?
You know, I think that the Calgary Stampeders made an adjustment that was something that the Saskatchewan Roughriders maybe didn't anticipate at halftime, because when you're shut out, and again, going back to the comment, and again, very apropos, if you don't score any points in the second half, it's tough to win any game. But the Roughriders secondary got banged up in that game in Calgary, and the fact that you lost both Nelson Lacombo and Marcus Sales. Marcus before the kickoff even happened, and then Nelson, of course, in that first half. And then you start substituting Kerfala Exume, and I think the Stamps did a masterful job of detecting where those adjustments had been made by the Riders' defense, and you could start to see some receivers break free and break into the clear a little bit. The Roughriders' four-man pressure just wasn't getting home right away. I know Coach Mace said in the post-game show about the defense and how the defense needed to be better, but I think the offense as well, you know, the one blown coverage that we've seen over and over and over again the last couple of days was that miscommunication on the right side of the offensive line where you never, ever would have expected it between Jacob Bramer and, of course, Jamarcus Hardrick. But, you know, saying that, maybe it was just one of those games, right? Let's face it, Calgary was buzzing. There was all kinds of atmosphere in that stadium, so wasn't the outcome you wanted, but I think that now the measure of the team is going to be the bounce back, right? Like, are we going to bounce forward? Are we going to bounce back? And I'm curious to see how this team comes out in front of what will be an electric stadium on Sunday with the Riders and Bombers for Labor Day Classic number 60.
A good football team beat a good football team on Saturday. The Stamps executed. There was those 3 or 4 plays, and it's cliche, but there's 3 or 4 plays in every game that will determine the outcome, and those 3 or 4 plays went the Stamps' way. But as we chatted on the show yesterday, it started early in the first quarter with an uncharacteristic Keyshawn Johnson drop or a miss in the end zone, which would have put him up 7, but then we go for the field goal. Lothar misses, and if you're Brett Lothar, someone messaged me after the show yesterday saying, listen, because of the score and the way that the game was, the Lothar situation didn't get the spotlight. There was a lot of other things going on, but he's like, can you not ignore that on the show tomorrow if you are going to bring it up? Yeah, it doesn't help when he, from, 28 yards, Dave, was that initial field goal, and he missed. And then you could just tell that the Stamps got a little bit of life from that, and it seems like the Riders deflated a little from that.
No, you're right. And so to start with what you were commenting on, the Keyshawn Johnson play, I've seen it a number of times. And, you know, I don't think it was a Keyshawn drop by any means. Again, it was just the ball may or may not have touched his extended fingertips as he was trying to make the catch in the back of the end zone. Trevor Harris was a little off balance when he made the throw. And again, that's the game of inches that is football. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Yeah, if the Riders score there, that's a big opportunity for them very early in the football game. And then, yes, a couple of play later, then you have Brett Lothar come out and miss the field goal. And I don't think there's anybody more torn up about it than Brett himself. And the fact that, you know, he readily admits, right? What was the quote? I'm the worst player in the league. It's pretty hard to overcome that when the confidence level is at that point with Brett Lothar. And we're going to wait and see.
There's a bunch of players on the Ottawa Redblacks that are probably like, hey, Brett, hold my beer just a second. Let me go out there and show you. No. You're far from that. There's a whole bunch of us here that are really should be on that list. Dickinson talked about it in the post game yesterday, and we played the clip. Something about they created a 5-man front that was a new twist or wrinkle apparently from the last time they played at Mosaic Stadium or whatever, and they were able to get pressure. But didn't you think that the Stamps, it started with them containing the Riders' run game? A.J. Ouellette was getting some yards, but it was a hard 3 and 4 yards, and there was no breakaway long runs. Like, every inch was being earned on both sides of the ball in both run games.
No, you're right. And I think that was one of the things that stood out to me is that Dietrich Mills was later in the game able to go ahead and find some running seams and really allow the Stampeders to move the football and chew some clock and demoralize the Saskatchewan Roughriders. For A.J. Ouellette, again, not for a lack of try or effort. Again,
No, not at all.
6-7 yards he was getting, and the Riders did, I thought, really intriguing things to get him outside the tackle, inside the tackle, running into the A gap, running again different spots through the line to try different things. Even again, if you're watching the YouTube stream, you see AJ Ouellette taking a screen pass, right? So the Riders did a lot of creative and innovative things to try to let their playmaker get the football and move with it. Unfortunately for the Riders, it just didn't match what Dietrich Mills was able to do on behalf of the Calgary Stampeders. And I think that's part of the thing too, is that the Stampeders were able to identify where some of those pressure points were coming from. And unlike teams that we've seen recently in Montreal and BC and Edmonton, for example, Vernon Adams Jr. did a great job of deciphering where that pressure may or may not be come from, and then using his escape valve to go ahead and get rid of the football and move and advance the football consistently, which, again, you got to tip your hat sometimes.
We all know with the zone that the Riders play, they will give up some yards in the secondary, but it's bend, don't break. But it seemed on Saturday, and VA's stat, it's funny, Dave, after the game, you looked at the stats, VA was 14 of 21 for 222 yards. It's not like he blew the doors off. Neither did Trevor. I mean, they made just enough, but it seemed like when VA needed a pass somewhere in the zone, their receivers were in the exact right spot between the linebackers and the secondary, and they were able to get chunk yards when they really needed it most. And a lot of it was on second down to convert and keep the sticks moving.
Well, yeah, and it wasn't to the usual suspects, right? Because both Dominique Rhymes was missing in action. Of course, he was out with the game, Tevin Jones as well. So you don't have those two. And I was looking at it, I'm like, well, where is he going to go? Because if I'm the Riders, I'm going to cancel Jalen Philpott and I'm going to take away Clark Barnes. And the Riders did both of those things, but it was the other guys that kind of came in underneath. And that was the difference in a lot of different ways. And you're right. Like, they were chunk plays at times that Calgary was able to get. And Vernon Adams, boy, did he look confident, but he looked patient, because there's times where he'd run around, right? Yeah. Looking around, waiting for something to happen. But this time he kept his eyes downfield. And in my humble assessment, I just thought that, he looked like he was in command of what was going to happen. And the Riders just couldn't disrupt him enough without sending pressure in their 4-man front. So again, the team talked about how much they learned the first time they played against Calgary. I'm sure they're going to talk about the second time they played against Calgary and how much they'll learn from that video.
Riders were hit with injuries. Nelson Lacombo goes out, and he was in a walking boot by the end of the game, which shifted things there. Jackson Ford, who was coming in to play at safety, if you haven't played the position in a while, it takes a little time to get in there. I thought by the time the second half rolled around, like he looked a little more comfortable, but you can't fault him at all because he's playing out of position essentially because he hasn't played there all year. And they did that. And the Stamps did have a great game plan. I'm thinking even if, and not that injuries are excuses, with the game plan that the Stamps came in with, it almost seemed like by the time the fourth quarter rolled around that the Riders have had their way with pretty much everybody this year, except the Stampeders. Like, everything they did was working. And it just seemed like at any time, okay, especially near the end of the second quarter, when we got the touchdown and Trevor started going, I'm like, okay, Trevor Harris, here's the magic. We're on a roll. All right, this is it. Floodgates are going to open come the second half, and then halftime adjustments, and then nothing. When's the last time the Riders got shut out in the second half of a game? I was trying to think of it. Even when they haven't had great teams, it's been a while, hasn't it?
It's before 2024. I can tell you that. And yeah, it's remarkable in the way that the offense was rolling in that second quarter that it didn't carry over to the third. But again, Calgary's ability to get home and be physical up front, I think, is what set that tone and what disrupted that rhythm. So I'm very much looking forward to a conversation with Trevor Harris when the team returns to practice tomorrow, just to hear what he saw. Again, because he does have such great vision of the field and understand what's going on. But it was very, very quickly that Calgary was able to get to him. And again, you don't have a lot of time when the guy is averaging, 2.7 seconds before the ball leaves his fingertips. So I'm really, really intrigued as to what Trevor Harris might say on that front.
as we get ready for Labor Day on Saturday, Darian mentioned this yesterday, that he thinks the Stamps, it's their table to run now, because the Bombers, if it comes to a soft split, it's not like the Stamps have an easy schedule, but the Stamps, with the win on Saturday, their record against teams above 500 is 7-0. Their crazy losses against Ottawa, and one of them VA didn't play, the other one was a monsoon, so maybe throw that out the window. But the Stamps are beating the good teams or the playoff teams above them. And it's not like the Riders, you can only play who the schedule says you play. So there isn't that. The Stamps are beating the competition that technically could be ahead of them in the standings or they may face in the playoffs. The Riders, not so much. But as we look ahead to this Winnipeg situation this weekend, they're kind of trending in the right direction. They've won with some character. They're winning with injuries. They're doing just enough. And Dave, we talked about it last week. The Brady Oliveira show got running last week, and it's got running early. And then the tapping of the helmet started, and I'm like, oh, because what did Oliveira finish with last week in that game? Was it about 130-ish yards? And I'm like, uh-oh, that's the one guy who I didn't want to see start rolling downhill.
No, and you're right with Winnipeg, and I equate it to, you have to learn how to win, right? And I know that sounds ridiculous, but you do have to learn how to win. And that's one of the lessons that the Riders, even though they are a veteran team and, again, have continuity in roster year over year, you have to learn how to win those big pressure-packed games. And that's something that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have displayed that they're able to do over the last little bit. Now, they've got a ton of adversity coming in. You mentioned Jackson Ford, of course, the day before his 25th birthday, had a lot of playing time and looks like he may get more. He hasn't played a lot in the last 2 years due to injury. And again, the injury bug just kind of nipped him, but I'm curious to see what a full week of practice might look for him. But for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, in their receiving corps, for example, Kyron Moore, former Saskatchewan Roughrider, has been signed because they're just beaten up. Nick Dembski and Jareth Stearns both left last week's game. Both were on the field at practice. Neither were full participants in the Bombers' day one of preparation today. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Brady Oliveira just seems to, again, that's why he's the most outstanding player, right? He plays big time in big time games. So that will be interesting. But then the secondary for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers has been a little beaten up this year. And they are, again, by the looks of it, coming into Labor Day. So you look at it and there's a piece of you saying, boy, this team is just ripe for the taking right now. And, if the Riders can go ahead and get a big win on Labor Day and even find a way to win 2 in a row, then they really set themselves up nicely. That's great. But also there's the converse, right? Where all of a sudden, if you go ahead and you drop 2, you and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are tied, right, at 8-4. So it's 2 big weeks, but I'm with you. Like, this is such an intriguing matchup, and you look like the Bombers might be down, and there's a lot of people that have said, oh, they're down and out, they're too old and whatever, and then Willie Jefferson starts knocking balls down 5 at a time, right? So, intriguing matchup for sure.
I think all the pressure is on the Riders over these next couple games. They have to win. The Bombers don't, because nobody's expecting anything. Well, you're 6-4. Nothing. Everybody. And I think, now I don't know who, but there were a lot of people before the season, remember Dave said that Trey Ford was going to be the next thing since sliced bread as far as a quarterback being a Canadian in this league. And that was one of the things. And one of the other headlines that a lot of the smart people that comment on the CFL or write about it or have podcasts or blogs, that the Calgary Stampeders were going to be incredibly bad this year. I think it's safe to say that Dave Dickinson had other plans, and I think it's safe to say that they're legit. Now, if they go on and drop the next 8 games and end up 11-7, I'm a fool, but I don't think that that's going to happen. I can officially say I think the Stamps are not going to end up in 5th place in the West Division in the CFL.
No, I would highly doubt that. That would be a huge drop-off. But again, you're one hit away from your entire season changing seemingly in the Canadian Football League. And let's face it, with P.J. Walker and Vernon Adams Jr., the 2 quarterbacks for the Stampeders, there's a world of difference in experience alone. And Do I have faith that Dave Dickinson and his crew can coach up PJ Walker? Absolutely. But I don't know that they can get to the level that Vernon Adams Jr. is at, having said that. So that one
But I think that
coming up against Edmonton this weekend and the resurgence of Cody Fajardo, this is the matchup that really, this is going to be an eye-opener, because let's go back to Cody Fajardo's first start at Mosaic Stadium a couple of weeks ago, right, against the Riders. Saskatchewan puts up 8 sacks. Despite that, a valiant effort from Cody to go ahead and rally the team to get them back into striking distance in the fourth quarter in a game that probably should have been well out of reach by then. But I was speaking with someone that I greatly respected scout and respected eyes in the Canadian Football League. And the one thing that the comment was is that, remember when Cody Fajardo was in Saskatchewan, and remember how many sacks were allowed by the Saskatchewan Roughrider offensive line? There's 2 pieces to that, and that's Cody, and that's also, your quarterback, and your offensive line. So he comes in first game, gets sacked 8 times. The good news is, though, is that, Cody Fajardo is now a Grey Cup winning quarterback, and he understands, I think, a lot more of that, and having to find the hot routes and not having to rely on that little backspin in the backfield to get away from everyone. So that's what intrigues me. Calgary Stampeders, their defensive line, they got home last week. Can they do it against the Edmonton Elks and a team that has a real tough offensive line that has been battling hard this year? And can Cody Fajardo counteract that? That's exactly what you're going to see Labor Day in Calgary between the Elks and Stampeders.